Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar for the Africville Active Transportation Connections Project. We are having a bit of a technical issue on our end, and we just wanted to confirm and see how many people are out there right now in the audience. So if you're in attendance, do you mind going into your question and answer chat box over on the right hand of your screen and putting in a little message, a little okay or yes, just so we can make sure that that our live event is working properly. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second webinar to learn more about the Africville Active Transportation Connections. Apologize for the delay on this session. We're having some technical issues, but I think we are ready to get started now. Hi, my name is Megan Backus. I'm an active transportation planner with HRM, and I'm also the project manager for the Africville Active Transportation Project. To give you an idea of what this webinar is going to entail, we're going to start off with a presentation on the project, describing where how it started and where it's going, all the work that we've done to date. And then we're going to end the webinar with a question and answer period so that you, the attendees, can ask us any questions you may have for clarification, and also provide your feedback on all of the information that's been presented today. So before we get started, I just have a few slides here to help everyone orient themselves in Microsoft Teams, just in case you're not super familiar with the software. So firstly, for accessibility purposes, there is closed captioning functionality on Microsoft Teams. So you will have to turn on your own closed captioning on the bottom right hand of your screen. There should be a little button with 2 C's in it, and that should turn on the captioning for you. There might be a slight delay between when you actually press the button and the captions start up. Please note that this webinar is also being recorded, and it will be posted shortly after the session to the Shape Your City website. So you can also, at any point during the session, leave using that leave button in the on the upper menu of your screen. So there will be 2 portions of the presentation where we will be asking for your questions or your feedback on some of the information presented. So in order to ask your question, you'll be using this menu on the right hand of your screen. So there is a button down at the lower bottom of the screen that says ask a question. You can click that. If for any reason this menu isn't showing up on your screen when you logged in, there is a button at the top with 2 speech bubbles and a little question mark. You may have to press that to access the menu. And if you would like your name to be on the public record, you can put your first and last name into the box being pointed to by that upper red arrow. If you don't want your name to be part of the public record, feel free to either check off that post anonymously box or provide a nickname or just your first name if that's more comfortable for you. After you have your name in there, you can type your question or feedback into that box that states ask a question, and then send that over to the project team, and we'll be able to address any questions or feedback in the order that it comes in. Okay, so we were a bit delayed today. We don't have a ton of time, so I think we should get right into that presentation. We're really interested in hearing all of your thoughts, any feedback that you have on the work that we've done so far on this project. So the municipality has hired WSP as our external consultants on this project in order to support us through the development of this planning study. And they will be leading the presentation that you're about to hear today. So I'm going to pass things off to Jenny from WSP, and I will let her introduce herself to all of you. Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. Sorry about the delay there. So we're going to get started on this presentation, and I'm going to start you off. My name is Jenny Lugar. I'm a planner at WSP, and I do lots of active transportation projects, along with my colleague who's going to be hopping on shortly, Courtney Pine. So yeah, we'll get going. So this is the Africville AT Functional Plan, and this is our second live webinar that we've done now for this project. Next slide. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the background of Africville for those who may be unfamiliar. Africville was a thriving and close-knit African Nova Scotian community that was located on the south shore of the Bedford Basin at the northern point of the peninsula, roughly in the vicinity of where the current National Historic Site is located. The community had stores, a school, a post office, and a Baptist church, the CV United Baptist Church, which was really the cultural, social, spiritual center for many who lived in Africville. Despite requests from the community throughout the history of the community, basic services that were available to other residents of the peninsula, such as sewage, clean water, and garbage disposal, were not provided to the residents of Africville. And then the 1960s brought urban renewal projects to many cities across North America. These projects looked to build industry, infrastructure, that sort of thing in cities. And the benefits of these projects, as they thought that they were beneficial back then, have now been largely debunked, but unfortunately many communities, and Africville being one of the examples of this, were lost in the process of urban renewal. So in the Africville case, the residents of the community were relocated without their consent or consultation, and most of the homes were demolished. Former residents began to take action and seek justice in the 1980s. They formed the Africville Genealogical Society and began to look for compensation for the destruction of their community. And finally, in 2010, a formal apology was made by the mayor of Halifax, and a settlement was reached with many of the residents, former residents of Africville. Part of that settlement was used to rebuild the CV Baptist Church, which serves as the Africville Museum and is located at the National Historic Site now. And to this day, the site is a place of celebration where former residents and their descendants work really hard to keep the spirit of the community alive. The site, what is now the park, was designated a National Historic Site in 1997. One of the key elements of National Historic Sites is called character defining elements, and these are elements that shouldn't be changed and should be maintained. One of the character defining elements of the Africville National Historic Site is continued public access to the site. So some of this project has been brought forth with the recognition that there's no formally designated pedestrian or cyclist access to the site from the rest of the peninsula, or from anywhere else for that matter. And as of right now, to gain access, pedestrians have been walking on sections of Barrington Street that don't have sidewalks or pathways or anything, or illegally crossing a CN railway, which poses many risks. Project was initiated by an accessibility petition brought by the Africville Museum, and that is why we found ourselves here today. So that petition recognized that there were no formal pedestrian facilities that connected the National Historic Site to the HM sidewalk or Halifax Transit Network, and a request was made that be pursued, and we are here to talk to you about the results of that petition now, and we are well underway with the project to hopefully ensure that there will be continued access to the site. I'm going to hand it over now to Courtney, who's going to walk you through the options for the project.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Pine, formerly married, so Courtney McCarthy you might know me as. So I'm going to walk you through the rest of the presentation here, and of course, there's a couple of opportunities there for your question and answers. I guess questions, and then we'll do the answering. So this project was broken into 3 project phases. The first phase of the project is to review the proposed 3 routes that were identified by HRM, and we'll get into those here shortly. The next step is to look at preferred route for the AAA bicycle facility, or AAA network, active transportation network there, to ensure that it's accessible for all, and then also to prepare the functional design for the preferred facility once the consensus is, I guess you could say, brought forward, to look at which option that we're going to be pursuing further. So I did mention 3 routings, so we do see 4 on the screen. D, that's illustrated there in black, was looked at for all 3 routes. So this describing what these 3 routes are. Route A is shown there in the cyan color, and it's to build a connection on Barrington Street between Glebe Street and Africville Road, with a future extension to Niobe Gate Bridge down there by the Barrington Greenway. So that's looking at Route A. Jumping into Route B, which is shown in green, is looking to build a connection between Novalee Drive and Africville Lookoff Park, and then connection into Africville Road. And then C is shown in pink, which is looked at building a connection to Africville Lookoff Park and Africville Road by utilizing the formal rail corridor that runs parallel to Memorial Drive. And as I mentioned, D, which is being looked at for all three routes, is looking at building a connection from along Africville Road there to the Africville Museum. Perfect. So some key terms that you may hear us use is integrated mobility plan, or the IMP, and this here creates a vision for sustainable movement around HRM. The petition that Jenny had mentioned there was from the Africville Museum Society that highlighted the need for the AAA network to connect to the Africville National Historic Site, which is great that this route is now part of the IMP AAA bicycle network that is slated to be delivered by 2022. Another term that you've already heard me use is AAA, and that's the all ages and abilities. This is mainly looked at planning, design, and programming that enables use by peoples of all ages with a variety of physical abilities, so essentially everyone. Complete Streets is a focus on moving people and goods instead of vehicles. And then AT, or Active Transportation, is any form of human-powered mobility, walking, bicycling, skateboarding, using a wheelchair, and rollerblading. So this project has been going on for a little bit. We actually started it back in December of 2018, where we did the kickoff meeting, and we started to complete the sidewalk, and we did some stakeholder workshops there with the Africville Museum Society, and then we then furthered our outreach there to some external stakeholders and community groups, as well as in December of 2018. And then early in 2019, we did reach out to some utilities as well as property owners that were deemed as stakeholders in this project. And then, of course, we were put on a little slight pause. We then picked up the project again there in late 2020, so December 2020, where we re-met with those utilities and property owners that we had met with earlier in 2019 to ensure that all the information that we had gathered back then was still relevant or was updated accordingly to ensure that when we moved into the gathering all the background information, it was relevant moving forward. Now that we had all the information there going into 2021, we completed our review of the existing conditions to get a better feel for kind of what's out there today. And then, of course, what we've done is we've prepared conceptual active transportation facility design options for some feedback on that we're going to share with you now. So why are we here? We want to hear from you. We're meeting with the public through a couple of different sessions. So yesterday we held a webinar similar to this, and of course we're holding the second one now, which is the final session online. Earlier this afternoon we did meet to do a pop-up engagement there, and of course we're also meeting on Saturday morning, well, late morning there around 11 o'clock at another location there, and we'll dive into that a little bit closer. But what we want to hear from you is about identifying any needs and concerns that haven't been brought forward yet. Also, we're here to collect feedback on the initial assessment that we've completed, as well as get feedback on the recommended route and concept design options that we're looking to push forward. Then we're going to slightly touch on the evaluation criteria that we'll be reviewing as part of this option or this project to compare those options that we'll be showing. And then we'll provide you an update on what the next steps of the project are. So to get an idea of where the project study area or the full extent is, we've labeled a couple key streets that I've already mentioned a little bit about. So Glebe Street, Barrington, Novalia, Memorial Drive were those routing options we already looked at. Then also Africville Lookoff Park, which is here between the two, I guess you could say the two ramps, or the ramp as well as Barrington Street there for the McKay Bridge. And then furthest to the north there along the water is the Africville National Historic Site. And so I had mentioned earlier that we completed a site walk, and along that site walk, we wanted to pick up any of the existing conditions that could be improved or just that we needed to gather there to help us inform us on looking at the different routing and facility types picked along these sections of the project area. So one thing that we noted here in the top left corner is a photo that illustrates that there's currently no active transportation facilities that are connecting Africville Road to Barrington Street, as well as it is quite a large space of asphalt there, so it's not ideal for a pedestrian crossing, so that's something that we're taking into account, as well as there's a bit of a blind corner to the right there. The bottom left photo is a photo, well, a snapshot on Barrington Street there that illustrates that there's currently no active transportation facilities on Barrington Street in this section, as well as we see a heavy volume of truck traffic along this area, as well as it's just a single lane of vehicle travel in each direction with a quite narrow right-of-way. So along Route B, the top left image here illustrates kind of a footpath that's currently an unpaved trail, which is where the old rail bed used to be. There's currently no train service here, of course. The rail bed has been removed, but this is along that green path that we had illustrated earlier. The bottom left photo is actually illustrating the connection from the Africville Lookoff Park that's established today all the way up there at the top of Novalee Drive. As you can see, this is quite steep. So we're the person that took this photo is at the bottom, and the other person's there is at the top, that black dot that you can see at the very, very top. So it is a long, steep stretch there. And of course, that's been recognized as a challenge in the area. Along Route C, the top left image is actually the gate there, or the fencing that's actually closing off where the old, I guess you say, the CN Railway crossing used to be, that was formerly used as a pedestrian bridge, that was cut off. And that's here, you're actually looking at the Highway 111 interchange, or looking towards the McKay Bridge. So that's the challenge, of course, to be able to get across the vehicle lanes. And then the bottom left image is the old rail bed that I mentioned there that is not paved, but it does have some washouts, and that is along the pink route. And then finally there along Route D, which is along Africville Road, there is an existing sidewalk. It's more so a footpath, more so than anything. It's less than 1 meter wide, it's non-continuous, and it's very close to CN tracks, so that is definitely a concern and a challenge. The bottom left corner here is illustrating that there's no existing active transportation facilities. There's no crossing that's been designated here to help people get to and from the Africville National Historic Site, as well as in this photo here, you can see that there's heavy vehicles that use this corridor as well. So here's just a quick little summary of just a little refresher about routes A, B, and C, and then of course making that connection through D. So here's that opportunity where we want to get a little bit of feedback from the group that's on the call. So we just want to know if we've missed any pros and cons that are not on the screen here. So of course, this is an opportunity to review what's on the screen here. I'll go through this here in a second. But of course, if there's any thoughts that come up to mind, please put those into the question box there and we'll review them accordingly. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to compare routes A, B, and C against each other to help us to determine what would be the primary route or the preferred route that we'd want to look further into to determine what facility types could be installed along that corridor. So what we did here is assigned essentially red with an X as a con and a green with a check mark as a pro. So for Route A, we can see here that, of course, there's high traffic volumes and speeds along Barrington Street. There's a lot of utility poles or telephone poles along the corridor. And as I mentioned before, there's a narrow right-of-way there, so there's not a whole lot of space to work with, and there are some pinch points along the corridor that we've identified. However, this provides a great and direct connection to the Africville National Historic Site, as well as continues the existing multi-use pathway on Barrington Street towards Niobe Gate Bridge. Route B, a con there is the steep hill at Novalee Drive, as I did mention there as part of that photo, of it being quite a long, steep grade. But it does provide you an entrance to the Africville Lookoff Park. One thing to note, it is more of an indirect connection to get down to the Africville National Historic Site, as it does not follow the desired path. However, the benefit here is that it will connect into the future North End Bikeway network that's planned on Novalee Drive and then carry through the peninsula. And it does provide a connection there to the Africville Lookoff Park. Finally, looking at Route C, one of the cons there is, of course, it requires extensive infrastructure to cross Highway 111 interchange there, multiple lanes to be able to get access into the Africville Lookoff Park. It does not currently connect to any designated future bike routing at this time, but of course, it's ever expanding, so you never know for the future connections. As well as I mentioned for Route B, it's not a direct connection, so it's an indirect connection to the Africville National Historic Site at this time, and it does not currently follow desired footpath. But overall, it will provide a connection to the Africville Lookoff Park and could provide connection to the Africville National Historic Site through improvement. So I'm just going to give everyone like 10-15 seconds to see if anybody has any extra thoughts that they want to add to the group chat here. And if they pop up, we'll address them. If not, we'll proceed in the slide. So I'll give you about 10 seconds. All right, so we don't see anything coming in yet, so we'll continue. Oh, this is how to ask a question. There we go. So what we did is earlier on in the project, we did gain some feedback and some engagement there. And what we've noticed is that The recommended primary route that we want to further explore is Route A, which is that Barrington Street connection through down to Africville Road, which is D, and it's shown in black, with a secondary or additional upgrade there for B. So that'd be what we're wanting to further look at today. So as I mentioned, we're now going to dive in just to Route A and D, which we have here on the screen as illustrated in different segments. So to be able to zoom in, we actually broke this into 3 segments. So segment 1 is focusing on along Africville Road in the existing park. Section 2 is focusing from that parking lot up towards Africville Road and Barrington Street. And then section 3 is from that same intersection of Africville and Barrington through down towards Barrington, where it connects into Glebe Street. So jumping right into segment 1, this option only did have one option that was reviewed, which is utilizing the existing pathways that are currently within the Africville National Historic Site and upgrading those from its gravel or crusher dust surface to being potentially a multi-use pathway. Quite commonly for winter maintenance, we see that multi-use pathways are an asphalt surface that helps to maintain them during the winter. The multi-use pathway will accommodate all users, both people on foot and people on wheels that are using this space. As you can see here, we'd like to utilize some of the pathways that are currently established, as well as create new ones there to provide connection directly to the Africville Museum. Shown on here is a typical cross section that you may see as a multi-use pathway. We're showing this as a 3.5 meter wide surface. This may be 4 meters. We'll definitely keep that in mind as we go through our design as part of this project. One thing that we are keeping in mind is the existing beautiful matured trees and any vegetation or shrubbery that might be along and in the I guess you could say within the park already. And of course, we're going to try and avoid or work with the trees and whatnot in that space. So there might be some 3.5 meter spaces or maybe some 4 meter spaces. So it will vary along the route. Jumping into segment 2, which is the dark blue option that's shown here. We have 3 options here. 2A and 2B are very similar. So what they're illustrating here is a facility that would be traveling from the east parking lot, which is on the left side, would then navigate on the northern side of Africville Road. There then would be an active transportation crossing there, just as you can see in the space right here on either of the options. And then there'd be a crossing of the CN Railway at grade, meaning at the same level as the trains today. We then would navigate up Africville Road on the southern side and then make a connection into segment 3, which is here at the bottom right of the photo. What we're illustrating here by the green and the yellow is green is illustrating that multi-use pathway that we just looked at for segment 1. So that means it's the asphalt surface so that all users can utilize that facility. As another option, we wanted to illustrate a portion of that connection with yellow, meaning sidewalk. So what that means is that the sidewalk would be a concrete surface, and that would be mainly for your people on foot and people like wheelchairs users and those types of, I guess you say, active transportation users, whereas cyclists would then be on the roadway as a vehicle. So that's the main difference between 2A and 2B is just a little bit of the space allocation that's required for those options. Here's a better visual to illustrate that space I was talking about. So as you can see in the top left image, which illustrates option 2A is a multi-use pathway, and the option 2B there is that concrete sidewalk option. A third option was reviewed, deemed 2C. This is completely different from 2A and 2B. What you'd see here is from that eastern parking lot, we'd actually have a separated AT bridge, so grade separated structure, meaning that the bridge would cross the vehicles as well as the train tracks that are there and connect into the existing rail bed corridor that is there. Then it would be extended here underneath the bridge that currently is the footpath, and then this would be all upgraded here over to the Africville Road, Barrington Street intersection, and that could be a multi-use pathway. And also the bridge there is shown in an image as an example of what the bridge could look like, for example. That's just a sample. So here's that same cross section that you was seeing earlier of a multi-use pathway, 3.5 or 4 meters wide could be expected to be accommodated along that pathway. Jumping into option 3, So this here is looking from extending from that segment 2 that we just looked at up through to Glebe Street and near the transit stop that's currently there. So option 3A and 3B are very similar to what we just looked at for the comparison of the multi-use pathway and sidewalk options. So these options are very similar, where you'd have a new active transportation crossing across Africville Road there near the Barrington Street intersection. We then would proceed on the water side or the northern side of Barrington Street with either a multi-use pathway or a sidewalk that's shown in yellow. This then would extend pretty much to a little bit past Glebe Street there with an active transportation crossing to be able to provide access and users to get to the southern side of Barrington Street if desired. Here's another visual just to kind of get an idea what could that look like. Water being on your left side of this image here to illustrate the multi-use pathway and or sidewalk. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that option B, well, how did route B kind of tie into everything? For example, if option 2C, which is that one that looked with that grade separated crossing, that AT bridge, if that option was selected to be further reviewed, there might be an opportunity here to extend the existing footpath that's currently there and upgrade that to be able to get to the bottom of that hill on Novalee Drive. This then would provide a little bit more of a solid surface and maybe be able to maintain through winter for users that can make that steep climb up to Novalee. We understand, of course, that is very steep at this time to make that connection. However, those that are able to would then have a formal connection down to option 2C. Earlier, I did mention that we'd be just tapping into a little bit of the criteria that we're going to be using to compare the routing options and the AT facilities that we just went through. So here are some of the criteria. We're going to be looking at the connectivity and the directness, the comfort for all active transportation users. Safety and accessibility would be a big factor in looking at those options. We'll be looking at any impact to your traffic, your transit, and rail, as it is now an entity in the space. We're looking at environment, so your trees and your green spaces, utilities, and properties. Of course, we are looking for your feedback, and of course, you do form part of the criteria as we're reviewing these options. Also, we'll be meeting with HRM, which is, of course, the client in this case here, the project sponsor, to review their feedback as well. And then something else that will be taken into account is the cost and ease of implementation of these options. So just wrapping up here before we kind of get to the Q&A portion of the presentation is, as I mentioned earlier, we're going through the public and stakeholder engagement. As you can see, we had completed some advocacy groups there last week. We had our first webinar yesterday and our second and final webinar right now. We had one of our pop-ups earlier this afternoon, as well as we'll be meeting everyone on Saturday there at the Needham Center there, just off of Devonshire, at Saturday at 11 a.m. till 12. That's when we'll be there. Also, we're hoping to get on the agenda there for the ATAC meeting that's planned for November. So hopefully we'll get on the be able to present this project at that time. Then we're going to gather all the feedback. We're going to pull that together and then essentially pick the preferred option there and then bring that to something called the 30% design or a functional plan. So then what we'll do is we'll pull all that together into a design, formal construction cost estimate, pull all that together into a final report. Then we'll pass it over to HRM for the review. And then, of course, they'll then bring that to the next stage for the project. And we're hoping to do that in early 2022. So that was a lot of information. Of course, we can go back to anything that anybody has any questions on, but this time here, now it's your turn. So it's your turn to take a peek and to see if you guys have any questions, any comments, feedback. As they come in there, we'll address those. But at this time, these are the instructions again on how to ask a question.
Great, thank you for that, Courtney. I think we have a lot of information in that presentation. I'm sure there's gonna be some pieces that need some clarification, but seeing that we did start late, I think we definitely made up some good time on that presentation. So yeah, as Courtney mentioned, any questions or comments, any feedback, suggestions, the instructions are up on the screen now. I do have some questions that have come in, so we can address those one at a time. Okay. So here we have a question asking from Anonymous, what is the possibility of doing both option A and B because they seem to serve different areas / needs? Yeah, so there is a possibility of doing more than one connection. Really the objective of this project was to take those preliminary routes and find one that was definitely a priority. So as right now, we do have that recommended route being Route A as the primary route that we would really want to have that AAA facility. So all ages and abilities would feel much safer and more comfortable making that trip from the North End to Africville. So if that were the option we moved forward with, that would be that big AAA facility, and there is still the ability to have that secondary connection, as Courtney mentioned, in that Route B. So it wouldn't be maybe a full AAA facility, but it would be a secondary option for people who were able to make that connection. There's, as we move forward with the project, there may be the possibility of doing more than one connection. Once we, explore, I guess, the feasibility of the primary one that we look at, there may be the ability to do, phasing in the projects where maybe we focus on one right now, and then in the future, as we have some opportunity or opportunities to do project integration with something else, we may have the ability to put in another connection. So yeah, thank you for that question. And then we have another one here. Are you giving more weight to what is desired by the African Nova Scotian community? As a white person, I have some opinions, but they're not as important as those of the Black community. So yes, we are doing some engagement specifically with the Africville community. So descendants of the Africville community are going to be specifically engaged later in the near future, but later on in maybe November or so that we're able to bring them some of the feedback that we've heard from the public in order to inform some of the discussions we have with them as well. So we are going to be giving weight to all of their feedback as well on the project. As well, members of the Africville community have been consulted from the kickoff of this project through some of the conversations that we've had informally with some key members of the community before the project was even initiated. Some of their feedback and thoughts on what this project could look like did inform those original preliminary routes that were decided upon as well. We do know that from the conversations that we've had, the preferred option that we are looking at right now along Barrington and Africville Road is traditionally the route that is used to access Africville from that Africville community. So that's the way that they would access Africville if they're doing, traveling to any of the events at Africville, or they do have they've had the Walk to Africville event for the past couple of years, and that's the route that they're taking. Unfortunately, right now, it requires them to be escorted, have an escort down the street because it isn't safe at the moment for them to travel by walking or cycling or with any type of mobility device. But yeah, their opinion is a piece of that, is definitely a big piece of that evaluation criteria. Okay, another one coming in. So a comment here, option 2B is not a AAA option for cyclists, I think. So 2B, that was the segment to the sidewalk option, right? Yeah. Yeah, so essentially having a connection or a facility there that is just for pedestrians wouldn't specifically meet that AAA criteria because it would require a cyclist to not be on the sidewalk. It would require them to be on the road. It was included as an option just to show the different facilities that could be there. There are some different width constraints and things in this right of way. So just showing an option where it would be a bit of a narrower facility. Also, when the original petition had come in from the accessibility petition from the Africville community, the Africville Museum, it did mention, they were looking at sidewalks. So we felt that it was, putting in an option for sidewalks was also we thought it was worth including in the presentation as well. Was there anything you wanted to add onto that, Courtney?
No, I think you touched that quite well, Megan. The main thing is we want to provide options so that of course we're looking at all the facilities that could then fit in that space along that routing corridor, just to ensure that we were able to capture all the feedback there associated with this routing. So yeah, no, you captured that quite well.
Okay, and then here's another question here, or another comment. So option 3B doesn't work for cycling. For example, adult cycling with children. So we're just going to bring up 3B. So yeah, again, that sidewalk option. So yeah, similar response, including the sidewalk, just because it was something that came from the initiation of the project. But yeah, understanding now that it is included in that, you know, our regional center AAA bikeway network, it wouldn't meet that criteria for a AAA bikeway. And we do have another question here. So does the AT bridge belong to a particular option, brackets A, or is it under consideration for any routes, which is D? So if we could bring up the bridge option. So yeah, so this is the bridge option. So this is under the segment 2, and this is part of the option D. So this would be considered for for any of the, so there's option A, B, and C, and then this is the connection from the Barrington and Africville to the Africville Museum, which is included in all of the other 3 options. So it would be considered for all of them. We do just have 2 different location options and 2 different facility options. So this is where we saw segment 2A, 2B, and 2C, but it would be considered for any other option for any other route that's chosen. Sorry, that's a bit confusing.
Yeah, so just to kind of maybe help with that is this was of course shown with the route A option. However, as if you're familiar with the area here, it could work with the route B. And of course, depending on how route C would be able to connect into, would allow for this AT bridge for essentially any of those routing options. The reason why it's shown here as part of the route A, as it does make that connection there to the Africville Road and Barrington Street. But of course, that's just because of course that's the primary routing that was selected as to look at to further review and see if that is preferred option moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Courtney. Another comment and question came in here. Walking alone in this area currently feels unsafe, not just due to the lack of infrastructure, but also due to lack of other people. More AT infrastructure will surely help with this. Have you considered other ways to increase eyes on the street, lighting, and other ways to make vulnerable people feel comfortable moving and being in this space? Yeah, so this is definitely going to be, a consideration as we move forward in the project. We have heard there are some issues with, safety and comfort, like you said, not just actually accessing the site, but just being in the area as well. It can feel quite isolated at certain times of day. So I think as part of this project, as we move forward into more detailed design, so once we know what route we're looking for and prioritizing what facilities we want, that's really where we want to get to at the end of this project, is knowing where we want the facilities and what facilities we want. And then as it gets into some of the more detailed design, I think that's really where that big that safety and comfort piece is going to come in outside of just the facilities. Something that we'll have to be working with our engineers on the project as they refine these designs in, is there the ability to put some lighting through there, especially when we're like going through the park area, which feels, a bit isolated right now. Are there some other security features that can be added into our design prior to construction? And I know we've already gotten some recommendations through our engagement so far on things that would make people feel safer, more comfortable, maybe some like landscaping changes, following some of doing like a SEPTED analysis, which is, urban design for safety in public areas. So those are all ways that we can, as the project becomes more refined, move on with that. And if you have any recommendations for things, if you are familiar with the area and there are specific things that you think we could design or add into that design that would benefit it, feel free to put that into the Q&A, and I can definitely pass or keep that as part of the file. Okay, so we haven't received any other questions or comments, but we can wait for a few more minutes in case anyone else has any other thoughts to put in here before we wrap things up. Okay, we did get another question here. Are any improvements under consideration for the Look-Off Park, regardless of the route being chosen? Through this project, it's not within our scope for the active transportation project to be looking at any other improvements to this park at this point, other than the potential of that, like you said, that route, the connection, whether it was primary or a secondary connection to the other primary route we chose. However, there is some movement happening at council recently. They are initiating the development of an Africville visioning process. So it's still in those very early stages right now. A staff report is being written to even discuss how to tackle this process, but what it would look like is essentially putting together an Africville master plan that would be in partnership with the Africville community to look at the short, mid, long-term goals for those lands. And that would include the Africville Look-Off Park as well as the just Africville Park and the Africville Museum on the other side. So I think that's where those we'll be seeing some suggestions towards some improvements to maybe the safety or just the park landscaping use, things like that would come out of that visioning process. So I would definitely keep an eye out for that. I don't know the exact timeline, but that should be, in the near future, there should be at least a staff report to talk about what that process could look like. Okay, we have no other questions in here right now. Okay, everyone, well, we're here for a few more minutes, so if you do have any last minute thoughts, questions or comments that you'd like to stick in there, please feel free. But I'll just start wrapping things up. We're almost at 7 o'clock now. So yeah, thank you everyone for all of your participation today. Some great active participation, some great questions and feedback on our options. So as I mentioned earlier, this session, along with the session that we recorded yesterday at lunchtime, is going to be posted on the Africville Active Transportation Shape Your City webpage. So if you feel like watching it back, they'll be there. Also, if you haven't done so already, please consider completing the online survey. So that can also be found on the Shape Your City website. And I will paste that URL into your chat box there in just a minute. So there is another chance to talk to the project team. We will be doing a pop-up engagement in person this Saturday on October 23rd. We are going to be at the Needham Community Center in their multi-purpose room from 11 a.m. till noon. So please feel free to drop in. We're going to have all the information presented today up on some boards. Myself and Jenny and Courtney will be there to answer any questions or clarify anything if you have any burning questions left after today's session. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's everything. No other questions or comments have come in, so I think we can wrap things up. Let me just put some information in here for that Shape Your City website. I'm also going to include my contact information just in case. Okay, so thank you again for tuning in and for asking all of your questions. It was a great session, and I really hope that you learned more about the project and that you enjoy the rest of your evening.